What if I told you that the moment an empath finally collapses is not a failure of strength, but the beginning of something psychology still struggles to explain? Stay with me, because what Carl Jung uncovered about the empath's breaking point will force you to rethink everything you believe about pain, collapse, and emotional sensitivity. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche is not designed to remain intact forever. He said that within every person exists an alchemical process, one that can only begin after complete psychological destruction. And nowhere is this more visible than in the empath who has reached the absolute limit of what they can endure. Most people assume that when an empath finally breaks, they are damaged beyond repair, that they become bitter, weak, or permanently scarred. But Jung's work revealed something far more unsettling and far more powerful. The empath doesn't simply survive their darkest moment. They're dismantled, stripped down to nothing, and rebuilt into something entirely new. Here is what almost no one understands about what happens after an empath reaches their lowest point. According to Carl Jung, there exists within the psyche what he called the death-rebirth archetype. It is the psychological pattern where an old identity must die completely before a real self can emerge. This is not symbolic, this is not poetic, this is a psychological necessity. For empaths, this death is brutal. The old self dies, the self that overgave, the self that absorbed everyone's emotions, the self that believed love meant self-sacrifice, the self that thought being needed was the same as being valued. That version cannot survive the darkest moment, and it isn't meant to. Carl Jung said that the darkest phase of transformation is what he called the negredo stage, the blackening, a period of confusion, emptiness, and inner collapse. For empaths, this stage arrives after relentless betrayal, chronic manipulation, and emotional exhaustion that goes unacknowledged for years. They reach a point Jung described as psychological zero. No energy left, no hope left, no self left to give. This is the moment where everything goes silent. And this silence terrifies people, because in this void, the empath stops explaining, they stop fixing, they stop rescuing, they stop justifying their existence. Jung referred to this as sacred withdrawal, the moment when the psyche pulls energy back from everything that has been draining it. This is where the transformation truly begins. In the darkness, stripped of all roles and expectations, the empath finally encounters their authentic self. And this self is not soft in the way people expect. It is not endlessly forgiving. It is not self-sacrificing. It is grounded, discerning, and immovable. Carl Jung discovered that after this collapse, something crystallizes, a new inner structure forms, a self that no longer seeks permission to exist, a self that no longer negotiates boundaries, a self that does not explain itself to be accepted. This is where it becomes dangerous for toxic people. Jung explained that when someone integrates what he called the shadow, the parts of themselves they suppressed to survive, they reclaim enormous power. For empaths, the shadow holds their anger, their detachment, their ability to walk away, and their capacity to say no without guilt. In their darkest moment, the empath is forced to face this shadow, and instead of rejecting it, they integrate it. Their anger becomes clarity, their detachment becomes protection, their silence becomes authority. Jung called this state individuation, the birth of a whole human being, and here is where everything flips. According to Jung's concept of enantiodromia, when a trait is pushed to its extreme, it transforms into its opposite. The empath who once gave endlessly becomes highly selective. The one who tolerated everything becomes decisively final. The one who saw everyone's potential begins judging people only by their actions. This is not bitterness, this is psychological evolution. They do not lose their heart, they gain a spine. They do not become cold, they become precise. Carl Jung observed that once this transformation completes, the old personality cannot return. It is psychologically impossible. The empath who has descended into the underworld of the psyche and returned brings back what Carl Jung called the treasure hard to attain: discernment, self-respect, unshakable boundaries. They no longer chase understanding. They no longer explain their silence. They no longer fear being misunderstood. Their presence changes. Their eyes change. There is a stillness about them that unsettles manipulators and calms those who are genuine.
They no longer need to announce their strength. It is felt. Carl Jung said that there is a difference between wounded healers and transformed individuals. Wounded healers give from pain. Transformed individuals give from power. The empath who has survived their darkest moment becomes the latter. They still feel deeply, but they choose carefully. They still care profoundly, but only where it is reciprocated. They still give generously, but never at the cost of themselves. Carl Jung believed that the purpose of suffering is not punishment, but transformation, and the empath who has faced total collapse and emerged intact has fulfilled this purpose. They have turned suffering into wisdom, vulnerability into strength, and empathy into something sacred. The darkest moment was never the end of their story, it was the initiation. And once an empath completes this transformation, they are no longer breakable.